Chapter 6. Promotion to the Cardinalate Foretold. Another person who was very close to Luisa Piccarreta was the Venerable Cardinal Santo of holy memory. From the early days of his priesthood, Cardinal Santo had been a regular visitor to Luisa's house. Aunt Rosaria often spoke to me of Cardinal Santo, and although he had attained the high rank of cardinal, she always referred to him simply as Father or Father Santo. At first I did not realize that she meant Cardinal Santo. Once, when I was at home, the postman handed me a letter covered in Vatican stamps and bearing a cardinal's coat of arms. Only then did I understand who Father Santo was, whom I had heard my aunt mention so often. I asked her to explain why she called a cardinal by that name, but she answered, "I was very close to Father Santo. I treated him as if he were my brother. Every time he came to Corrado, to Luisa's house, it was I who accompanied him to various places, to see the archpriests or the bishop in Trani, and I showed him the sights of Corrado many times. He was a cheerful, jocular person, and when he celebrated Holy Mass, he seemed an angel. I knew Father Santo from the days of my youth, and on various occasions we had a meal together at Luisa's house with Angelina. Cardinal Santo would spend a long time talking to Luisa, and he once said to me, "Luisa always tells me that they will dye me red, make me a cardinal. But," and he said this jokingly, "I shall try not to have myself rigged out in a fancy dress." One day I saw Father Santo with a dark look on his face, and it was the only time that he did not joke and had very little to say. It was when Luisa was condemned. Despite the censure of the Holy Office, Father Santo did not interrupt his visits to Luisa, and he answered my question as to what had led to this disaster with these dry words: "Rosaria, please don't talk about all this, because it is we who are the most hurt by it." And after a long silence, he added, "These are tremendous trials that the Lord is sending us." As is common knowledge, Father Santo was an outstanding figure in the Roman Curia. Aunt Rosaria kept in touch with Cardinal Santo by letter, and it seems that he used all his influence when it was a question of translating Luisa's body from the cemetery to the church of Santa Maria Greca. At this point, I must confess that I am seriously remiss. I was unable to save the letters that Cardinal Santo sent to my aunt. Indeed, at the pious death of Aunt Rosaria, my nephew and niece, in emptying the house, threw away all the material which, in their eyes, had no importance, including Cardinal Santo's letters. This was a great loss. Such a source would have given great value to what I have explained above, and in addition, we would have known what Cardinal Santo thought of Luisa Piccarreta. The Cardinal's family archives should be researched in order to recover this valuable material. The Bishop Healed. It was during the year 1917. The new Archbishop of Trani, Archbishop Regime, perhaps influenced by that part of the clergy who not only attached no importance to all that was happening to Luisa Piccarreta, but openly manifested their hostility to the servant of God, had established a very severe decree with regard to Luisa. Priests were prohibited from entering her house, and from celebrating Holy Mass there, a privilege which had been granted to Luisa by Pope Leo XIII and confirmed by Pope Pius X in 1907. This measure was to be read out in all the churches of the diocese. This is what happened. While he was signing his famous decree, he was suddenly afflicted by partial paralysis. When the priest present at that moment came to his help, he made them understand that he wanted to be taken to Luisa's house. Aunt Rosaria described this unusual episode in this way. It was about 11 o'clock when we heard the sound of a carriage that stopped right outside the porch of Luisa's house. I looked out from the balcony to see who it was and saw 3 priests, one of them, as it were, supported by the other 2. Luisa said to me, "Open the door, the bishop is coming." In fact, Archbishop Regime was at the door, supported by 2 other priests, probably the vicar and chancellor of the Curia of Trani. The bishop was uttering incomprehensible words. He was immediately ushered into Luisa's room. It was his first visit to the home of the servant of God, who, as soon as she saw him, said, "Bless me, Your Excellency." The bishop raised his hand as though nothing had happened and blessed her. He was completely cured. Archbishop Regime remained in Luisa's room in a secret conversation for about 2 hours, and to the wonder of all, especially the priest, he emerged from her room smiling. He blessed those present and left. An effort was made to keep the case secret, and so it remained to the wider public. As long as he was in Trani, Archbishop Regime regularly visited Luisa Piccarreta, with whom he would have spiritual conversations. This episode inspired a sacred fear in the clergy, and Luisa's holy confessor, Gennaro di Gennaro, was able to continue his ministry more peacefully. After this event, Annibale Maria Di Francia also visited the servant of God more often.
End of chapter 6.
Chapter 7. Luisa and the Children of Corrado. In Corrado, it was said among the elderly women, also during my childhood, that whenever Luisa went out at night and in a closed carriage so as not to be seen, the children of Corrado would scamper in front of her carriage, shouting, "Here comes Luisa, the saint!" Luisa only went out when it was dark, as the ecclesiastical authority had prescribed, to avoid crowds gathering and scenes of fanaticism. At least once a year, usually in the summer, Luisa was taken to another house so that the spring cleaning could be done. The rooms whitewashed, and the straw or wool and the mattress changed, washed, and softened. Many well-off families of Corrado vied with one another to offer Luisa hospitality on these occasions. These included the Capano, Simadomo, Padroni Griffi, Azzariti families, and others who would send their own carriage to fetch Luisa. During this secret transportation, it would happen that the children of Corrado, as though suddenly inspired, would gather together and shout out along the way the news that Luisa was passing, saying, "Come out, everyone! Luisa the saint is passing!" And everyone would come to the doors of their houses with lighted lamps. One day, I discovered that my father had frequently taken part in these nocturnal gatherings with the other village children when Luisa was passing. As an adult and a Capuchin student, I asked my father, "Did anyone warn you she would be passing?" He answered me, "No, we sensed something and understood that the carriage with Luisa in it would be passing by." The soldier who never was. Due to a variety of events in the past and financial calamities, our family, from being well-to-do, had been reduced to almost to dire poverty. Because of the various misfortunes which befell the family, the death of my aunt's two sisters, the partial paralysis of her father, the emigration of her elder brother, who had gone to Argentina to seek his fortune, the whole property was sold or mortgaged. The very young brother, Francesco, was the only one left to administer the patrimony, which consisted of a wood-burning baker's oven, sufficient to relieve the family's plight. In the meantime, the First World War had broken out, and Francesco was called up. My aunt's mother begged her daughter to speak to Luisa, because only she could find a remedy for their situation. But Aunt Rosaria turned a deaf ear to her, until one day her mother, using strong words, said to her, "If you don't speak to Luisa, as from tomorrow, I won't visit her any more, and you will have to stay at home to do the housework." As soon as Aunt Rosaria, a scowl on her face, arrived at Luisa called her and said, "Why don't you tell me anything? I have known it for ages. Tell your mother that Francesco will not leave." And so it came to pass, the day on which my father had to present himself for recruitment. Without causing any pain, his neck swelled up enormously, so that he was considered unfit for service. On the journey home, the swelling disappeared. This same phenomenon happened for 3 consecutive years until he was rejected. This was confirmed to me by my father, who said in the Corrado dialect, "Ched fem mafat vedias nav." That woman has made me see new things. And with words and gestures, he explained to me what had happened. Indeed, by running the bakery, my father managed to repair at least part of the damage to the family's financial situation.